Hi friends, your pal Scott Garibay, and today we are going to talk about Stranger Things Season 5, Episode 4. We start Episode 4, and the title of this one is Sorcerer. And this gets really, really interesting. So let's talk about it. All right, so first of all, let's talk about that title, Sorcerer. So I'm pretty sure I remember this correctly. There's a scene in here where Mike Wheeler is talking to Will Byers, and Will's struggling. He's been having a tough, and the reason why is, Will Byers was taken into the Upside Down, and he's never fully recovered. And now in season 5, we're shown that he was taken by Vecna, right? So in season 1, The Vanishing of Will Byers, episode 1, that was Vecna. Vecna took him, right? And he didn't just get a little bit of, he didn't, I was in the Upside Down and there's some pollywogs in me. Like, he was like majorly, he was marinated in the Upside Down, right? And he was specifically kept alive to be a spy for Vecna, which is really fascinating, right? But he's had a tough time. And what gets really interesting here is the relationship between Mike and Will. So they are friends, but their friendship has been strained. It's been strained significantly over multiple events, right? And Mike has stayed by and been Mike Wheeler has been extremely supportive of Will Byers, arguably as supportive as Jonathan Byers. Although I want to be super clear here. Jonathan Byers sacrificed anything and everything for his brother. His love for him is unquestioned, right? But Mike Wheeler has failed Will Byers a few times, not because he didn't care for Will Byers or cared less for Will Byers, but specifically because Mike had failures of his own, right? Like, Mike Wheeler had failures of his own. Selfishness is one of them. Mike Wheeler is a very selfish person. He is a person of privilege. He has had a ton of privilege. And because of Ted Wheeler, who is a very good provider. And I would argue a good dad. Because, like, yeah, so I think Ted Wheeler I'm going on record here. I think Ted Wheeler is a good dad, right? Like, and I think that needs to be said, because I think there was a lot in here that Mike Wheeler wasn't a good dad. And I think that's just not correct. It's not right, right? It is really not right. I do think Ted Wheeler is a good provider, all right? And a good father. And I think in many ways those are they synonymous? They're definitely parallel. Okay. I don't think you could be a good dad without being a good provider, right? Yeah, I think that's definitely true. You can be a good provider without being a good dad. So they are parallel. They are not synonymous, right? But I do think Ted is a good dad. He does what needs to be done. I don't think he does more than he needs to do. Like, he's not father of the year, but he is a good dad. I think, and that's an interesting discussion that I think the Duffer Brothers opened up. All right, so Mike Wheeler has failed Will Byers at multiple times, right? And there's this question of, and then you reach this question point where you're like, okay, I get it, but they have this strained relationship. And so Mike comes in and he wants to encourage Will, but there's this question of, like, do they even know each other, right? They've been physically separated. He took one trip. That trip didn't go great, right? Like, they didn't do they didn't, bond as friends again. And so are they even friends, right? But Mike goes in and he says, listen, I want you to understand something. You are an important person to me, right? I care about you. And he, and he makes it clear that he does care about Will Byers, which I think is important to understand, right? That yeah, it is important to understand that Will is, yeah, it is definitely important to understand that Will is that they are still friends together, and you know, yeah, okay, sorry. So Will is, so Mike gets to the point where he goes to encourage Will, and he says, listen, your power is you're a sorcerer. And he links back to Will the Wise, his character. Now, this was confusing because I thought for sure that Will the Wise was a wizard, right? But he comes at him and is like, you're a sorcerer. And the reason why is, you know, wizards are getting their magic from tomes and books, right? But your magic comes from inside, this really unique aspect of yourself, right? And I thought this was, I love that they linked the title of this to Will's character, right? And I thought this was really important. And I also just really liked that even now in season 5, even though they've been playing Dungeons and Dragons less than they've ever played, right? That in Mike's mind, the world is still functioning through Dungeons and Dragons. And I think this is important too. Like, I think people get, well, there's no question. I've seen this. Like, there's this guy, Baron DeRop. He was just like, he was one of the major D&D YouTubers, and he quit. He just quit out of the blue, right? Like, you know, it just, and then he came back, you know, but people get frustrated with D&D at times, and they'll drop off. But that doesn't mean its impact to your life stops. I think that's fascinating. Like, the impact to your life is can still be very, very high, even if you're, you know, the impact to your life can be very, very high, even if you're not playing Dungeons and Dragons at the time. Even, you know, campaigns that might have happened weeks, months, years, or even decades before could still be impacted. That's powerful. That is incredible, right? But I thought, you know, this was I love this title, right? I love that they get into the difference between a wizard and a sorcerer, and a lot of times I have thought, I'm even on record, you know, on this channel saying that I think sorcerers are really not needed. But this was an excellent description of the distinction between a sorcerer and a wizard, and it was meaningful. It was actually meaningful to the story, and it was linked to Will's character. It was linked to their campaign, and it was really, really important. Also, I will say, yeah, it was very, very important, and I absolutely was extremely excited about this. I love that they did this with the title. Every single word you just heard in this video is my humble opinion. Nothing more, nothing less. The important part is when I get to hear your humble opinion. When you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider subscribing and have a fetch millennium.